So you moved to Mexico and you just bought a car and you need to figure out, where do I even go to register this? How do I pay taxes? How does that work? You're in luck. I just did this yesterday and I took good notes and I recorded the entire process and I made a presentation. So without further ado, here is how you buy a used car, change it to your name, and pay the registration. So you've got a car or you're looking to register a car here in Mexico. If you're a recent expat and you're moving down here, you're trying to get a car, you're not sure if you should import your car or buy a local car, let me quickly walk you through what you can do legally and then walk you through my process of actually registering a car. So, a quick note on visas: if you're here on a tourist visa, you're just here visiting. If you're doing that, you can temporarily import your vehicle. You get this tip permit, TIP, and then you can bring your vehicle here for the duration of your visit. But you can't register it here. It's got to go back home with you. If you are a temporary resident, you can also bring a car here on a TIP, temporary import permit, and you can also buy and register a local vehicle here. If you are a permanent resident, you cannot register a temporary import permit because you're not here temporarily. You have a permanent, right? Basically, at this point, they want you to contribute to the economy. They want you to just buy a car. Or if you're going to live here as a permanent resident and you have a car that you already, previously brought in as a temporary, they want you just to pay the import taxes and have it here officially. So that's one of the kind of disadvantages of having permanent residency, is that if you had a vehicle you were just using here without paying any import taxes, now you got to pay those. Or just buy one that's already here that has already had those taxes paid. I'm not an immigration consultant. This is just what I understand. This has been my experience, but with everything in Mexico, your mileage may vary. So, on to the actual process. First, we're going to cover the required documents. We're going to cover the actual process, including walking you through my experience, and then we'll talk about the fees you're going to have to pay. So, as with everything in Mexico, the list of required documents is always extensive. You always need the original, you always need copies of everything. Mexico's systems don't talk to each other. So they make you pull the documentation and show to them, you know, things that they should really have access to, but they just don't. Their systems don't talk. So they require you to prove that your taxes are paid and things like that because they can't apparently pull that. So, first thing first, you need to have the original sales receipt from the vehicle. This is also called the factura original. And this is like when the car was originally sold. It has like a hologram on the front. It says the official sale price, everything. And what people do here is when they sell the vehicle, on the back of that original factura, they endorse it. It will say, I, so and so, endorse this to, in this case, to Jeremy. So on the back of mine, it said, I, original owner, yo, original, I know their name. I'm just not saying it because I don't want to, privacy stuff. So, yo, Jorge, endoso este vehículo a, I, George, endorse this vehicle to Jeremy. Signed by George. So you need to have the original sales receipt and have either a bill of sale or have just the back of the factura signed over to you, which is a very common thing. There's no formal way to do it. It just has that and then their signature. That's it. You also need to have the previous owner's identification document. So in my case, I had bought a car, and in addition to just renewing it, I was also changing the ownership. So this is obviously a much more involved process than if you were just doing an annual renewal in your name already. So everything you see here was for me to register the used vehicle that I'd purchased here in Mexico. So I needed the previous owner's identification. They just gave me a copy front and back of their INE because they were a Mexican resident. You need your ID, both original and a copy. So in my case, I'm a permanent resident, so I provided my Residente Permanente card, just a copy front and back on a single piece of paper. I also had the original with me when I went. You need to bring your current driver's license. This does not have to be from here, from Mexico. I took mine from Utah, where we used to live, and it's good through 2030, so they took that, no problem. You need to provide proof of your address to show that you live here, both the original and a copy. So in my case, I have a formal rental agreement for my house, which I provided to them. And then, as with everything in Mexico, there's always unwritten extra things they want you to take. So the bureaucracy in Mexico is just so inconsistent. But in my case, what I've learned being here, doing all these different processes for immigration, is just take everything with you and take a copy of everything, because they might ask for some random thing and you just want to be there and do it. Because, by the time I got to the lady who asked me about this, I'd already waited 5 hours. So you don't want to get up there and not have something, right? So just take everything you own. So in my case, I took my rental contract, the original, and a copy, and copies of my landlord's IDs, which I don't think you'll need, but I added, so I took it. Um, the electric or water bill, these are supposed to be in your name. Um, the lady asked me about that, and I just said, hey, like, I'm just renting here. The water bill is in the landlord's name. I took the original water bill and a copy. She understood it and didn't say anything else. If you have a bank account here, you can also take a bank statement that has your address on it. You need to bring the current vehicle registration card. Here, this is called the Tarjecta de Circulación, circulation card. It's usually in your glove box. You got to take that in with you. You need to take your license plates, both license plates. Because here, when you get a ticket or something happens, they will take your license plate as sort of like a collateral until you pay your ticket. So they want to make sure you have both license plates, which means that your car is sort of in good standing with the police department. Right? So you'll want to have those off of the car already, take them in with you. You need to drive the actual vehicle there because they need to verify the vehicle. They want to check the VIN numbers. They want to make sure that the make and model and everything matches. Obviously, there's a lot of vehicle theft here. People bring in vehicles from the US, whatever. So they want to just verify this is the actual vehicle. So they will check the VIN number in a couple different places on the car to make sure it's the actual car that you are renewing. This kind of causes an issue if you try and pay someone to go and register it for you, because they've also got to take your car there or you have to go meet them there or something. So this can't be such a hands-off process. This last one here is called, they want to see proof of payment of the previous 5 years of taxes to show that your car is current, right? In Mexico, if you buy a car with outstanding tenencia, outstanding, like, it's not a tax, but it is a tax. If it hasn't been paid, you have to pay it up to date. So if you buy a car that hasn't been registered for 5 years, you as the owner have to pay the 5 years of registration in order to register it in your name. So it's really important when you're buying a car in Mexico to go to the website and to check that. I will link the website in the description that you can pull up your vehicle and make sure that it's paid. Because if not, you'll have to pay it. More on this later because I didn't actually have that, but I knew they could pull it for me. They just charge you for that. So if you have it with you, you can take it. Otherwise, you can pay. I paid like 200 pesos and they pulled it for me. So I will talk about that later. So step one, you get all that documentation up. You got to go to the office. I will link the Playa del Carmen office in the description because that's where I went. It's standard government building. Lots of tents outside to wait outside, and then also more waiting inside. And the reason for that is that if you pay your bill before the end of February, it's either heavily subsidized or part of it is entirely subsidized. So it gives you an incentive to go do it in the first 2 months of the year, which also means everyone else is doing that. So you're going to have lines if you're going at the beginning of the year. So like I said before, you need to take the actual vehicle you're registering because they want to check it. You need to take all of the required documentation that we just mentioned in the previous slide. You want to take a large screwdriver. This is where I went wrong. I took my plates with me, but then when I got there, I was like, oh, like I got to put these plates on. And long story short, I went to a conveniently located ferreteria, a hardware store that's right next to it that sells big screwdrivers. Fortunately, it was like $3. It wasn't a big deal, but I don't know why I didn't think that through. So now take a screwdriver. You can probably resell it there before you leave to some other person that forgot. But like I said here, plan on 5 hours, especially if you're going at the beginning of the year, because everyone is there. I think in total I was there 7 hours trying to renew this. So take some snacks and a water bottle. Plan on being gone all day. Like I mentioned, there is a discount for paying by the end of February, so expect long lines if you go during that time of year. So step 2, what is the actual tramite? Tramite is a word you'll hear for any government procedure or process. There really isn't a great translation into English of this word, but the closest word would be something like procedure or process. So it's called a tramite. That's like something you have to go do here for all these immigration procedures, but instead of saying procedure, they say tramite. So I called it a tramite because that's what everyone calls it here. So step two is you're going to provide all the documents and you're going to actually effectuate the change of ownership. This is the tramite. So you go in and you got to wait in line. When I was there, we were waiting outside, and then once we got inside the building, there's just these rows of chairs where you have to just wait one by one, and there's four, government office worker tellers waiting, and it's a very long, slow process. So once you get inside, you'll wait till you get to the very front of the line, and then you'll go up to the cajero, which is like a teller in English. You go up to them, you give them all the documents that I mentioned in the first step. She'll ask for them one by one. You just go ahead and provide them to them. She was very helpful to us. And then you've got to complete the name change. In my case, I was completing the name change for the change of owner. And there's a few different things here they talked about that I didn't quite understand what these were. They mentioned you have to do the alta and the baja. And what I later understood this to mean was you have to do an alta and a baja, like an upload and a download. Basically, you have to take the previous person out of the system, baja, and then you have to put your name in and like upload yourself into their system, the alta. So essentially, you're pulling the previous registration out and you're putting your new registration in. They just charge separate fees for these, an alta and a baja, because you could be registering a car that isn't currently registered. For example, if your car was totaled in a wreck, it might have been pulled out of the system while it was being fixed or whatever. And now that you're fixing it, you just have to pay for the alta to sort of bring it back into registration. So in my case, my car was already registered, so I had to do the baja and the alta to pull out the old owner and put myself in as the new owner, essentially. There's also a fee you have to pay called the change of owner fee, where they make the change. They will check the tenencia payments to make sure that you are current. If you have this 5-year history with you, you can give it to them. Otherwise, you can pay them a 214 peso fee, and they will pull it for you and print it for you. So I just had them do that because I knew they would do it, and I didn't want to try and find the printer. So the last thing here, you will pay your taxes or derechos. I will go through all of these fees on another slide, but just letting you know that that's what you're going to do. What's important to note right here is when you leave to go to the next step, you don't actually pay yet. They just give you a quote. They say, okay, here's how much it's going to cost. But before they can approve you and like take your payment, they need to verify that your vehicle is legit. So they will give you sort of a temporary here's the vehicle that we need to verify. Here's the quote for what you're going to have to pay. So you take that and you go to the verification area. You take this and basically they want to verify that everything that you said about the vehicle is accurate. So you go over to the verification section. They will, hand copy your VIN onto a piece of paper. And then you take that outside with this little form they give you and you take it there's an official employee outside who checks the cars. You take that over to him. He will go to your car with you or ask you to bring your car there's kind of a little like a portable garage area there that he asked me to just bring my car into that because that's where he was sitting in the shade, So I bring my car in, we open the hood. He looks at the VIN number on the motor. He checked the VIN number in the door and the VIN number in the windshield to make sure they all, properly corresponded with the VIN number that I said that I had. He took a picture of those as well. And then sent it inside to be printed. And then he said, yep, you're good to go. And he signed the paper. And then I went back inside to the verification window. That guy took the print out from the other guy and then filled out a few more forms and then gave me a form that said, hey, your car is verified, you're good to go. So then you take that form and you go back to the original teller, the cajero that you talked to in the previous step, who gave you the sort of the quote, right? Who you gave all the documentation to. This process is not very well organized. Basically, you have to go, but you have to go back to the original person you talked to. So even if there's other cajeros open, the one you spoke with initially still sort of has your case open on their desk or whatever. So you have to just kind of go and wait awkwardly kind of by the window until they're done with the person they're now helping so that you're like next, and then once that person left, You go back up, you give them the documents from the verification people and say, okay, yeah, your car is legit, everything's good to go. They take that, they go in and verify and say, yes, everything is good. They will then show you the fee quote and ask you to make the payment. And now, previously, you had to make the payment like at a bank and bring in a pay stub. Now they just have a credit card machine right there that you just put your thing in. It's super slick. So you got to pay the fees. So you got to pay the actual procedure fees, these tramite fees. You're paying an alta, a baja, a change of owner, and your taxes and potentially tenencia if you have to pay that. And then I had to pay the fee for pulling the 5 years of previous tenencia payments. And then we'll talk about the subsidy on the next page. So here is my actual receipt. Let's go through these. I had to pay the alta for the change of owner. So that's what that means. I had to pay to put my information up into the system. I had to pay the baja to pull the previous owner's information out of the system, sort of to deregister and then re-register the car, essentially. I had to change a cambio de propietario. That means just a payment for the change of owner fee. They always charge fees if they can. So here's another one you got to pay. I had to pay derechos. This would be what in the US we would consider to be like your vehicle registration fee. Your vehicle registration taxes, essentially. So basically, in my case, this is about $30. And then because I did this early in the year, I got a subsidy on my name change fee of about half off. I paid 538 pesos for the name change, and then they gave me half off for doing it early on in the year while I was still in good standing, essentially. The interesting thing here is you'll see that they gave me a subsidy here for 808 pesos, which is exactly what I would have paid in Tenencia. So before I bought my car, I checked on the government website to make sure that my car's tenencias were paid up to date because I wasn't going to back pay someone else's registration fees. So in addition to having my car current in the system, because I also paid it before the end of February, they basically waived the tenencia. And granted, my car's a 2016 Jeep. It's nothing special. If I had a high-end Porsche, I kind of doubt they would be this generous with me on that subsidy. But because I have a 2016 Jeep that's 9 years old, I think they kind of are a little more generous with that. So keeping your car current and registering it early actually is significant saving. I saved the entire tenencia. You see, they charged me 800 and then they refunded me 800 as a subsidy. So it does make sense to do this early in the year and to keep your tenencia current because if you keep it current, you actually never have to pay it. So the last thing I paid for here was essentially the tax for the Tarjecta de Circulación, which is like the registration card. So these are what I paid in payment 1. Payment 2 was for the issuance of the payment history. You recall that I mentioned that you have to provide 5 years of, tenencia, proof of payment, essentially, but I didn't have a printer and it was kind of a messy thing. So I just knew they would do it for me for 200 pesos and I just was happy to give that to them. So I had to pay 226 for their work to go pull that for me out of the cloud. So you pay the fees, you then take the receipts, and you go over to the emplacación, which means placas are plates. So emplacación is like the plate place to go get your plates. So you go over there. Again, you got to wait in line again. There was 2 or 3 rows of people when I went over. When it's your turn, you go up. They will review the payments that you paid. They will review the information provided to them from the cajero, the teller. They will issue you new plates. In my case, I asked the teller if I could just keep my old plates to save some money. So you can pay, I think it was maybe 1,400 pesos or so to get new plates. I didn't really care that much about the plates, so I just said, hey, can I just keep mine? She's like, yeah, I don't care. So I ended up not having to pay for that. Otherwise, on that previous fee section, you would have seen me paying for emplacamiento, like 1,500 pesos, but that's why you didn't see that because I just kept my original plates. So he did not give me plates in my situation. He then prints and issues you a new registration card or the circulation card, the Tarjeta de Circulación. This is the card that you always leave in your car that shows that your car is registered and you're the owner and you're good to go. Take that, go outside, take the screwdriver you brought, put those plates on, go home and pour yourself a stiff drink because you just beat the Mexican bureaucracy. One quick note about tenencias. In the video, I mentioned tenencias, but I didn't really get into those. What that is was in the early 90s, the federal government issued a tenencia, essentially a tax on vehicles in order to raise some money to help the government. Through the years, the federal government, there were some people who said it was unfair to lower income people and that it disproportionately affected poor people and, all these things. Over time, what happened was the federal government was issuing a tenencia and then the state governments were issuing tenencias and then the federal government eventually phased it out because it was kind of unpopular and they, found other ways to make the money. I don't know. But individual states still had the right to keep issuing tenencias to keep charging tenencias if they wanted to. So where I live here in Playa del Carmen, the state of Quintana Roo still still charges tenencias. So tenencia is something you have to pay every year. It's kind of like ownership tax. It was meant to initially be charged on higher end vehicles. In my case, if you saw my receipt, my 2016 Jeep has a tenencia of 800 pesos, which was entirely removed because I just renewed the car on time. But I know for some higher end cars, like I have a friend who has a Porsche, he told me his tenencia was 30,000 pesos to renew, and it does not go away. So I think the government here offers that subsidy kind of on, you know, older, crappier cars like mine. But if you have a new, nice car, you're probably going to still pay tenencia. So all that to say that the federal government does not charge it anymore. The local governments do charge it. And if you're going to buy a used car, you definitely 100% need to verify in the government system that the tenencias are current. If not, you can factor the cost of that into, the buying price of the vehicle. But of course, everyone tells you they're all paid. Yeah, but you personally need to go check that because that's where I see a lot of buyers get kind of scammed is by not checking the tenencias because the previous owner just never paid it. So you'll have to pay yours plus all the years that it wasn't paid to bring it current. I hope this video was helpful for you to learn how to register a car and to learn a little bit more about tenencias and kind of what you need to look for as you're buying a used car and how that process looks to go register the car. If my content is helpful, please like and subscribe and share this video with your friends.